Okay. Hi, everyone. This is Bob Davis. Thank you for joining us tonight. I'm the host of the Soul Patrol Spotlight, and hopefully you've all tuned in for tonight's episode. If you meant to be someplace else, you probably should leave. For broadcast tonight, special guest, a really good friend of mine, Miss Dawn Silva. As special guest, special added attraction, Mr. Henry Myers. And I know you don't know who Henry Myers is, but you're going to know who he is by the time this broadcast is over with. So we're going to get started. We've got a lot to cover tonight. I'm not going to do too much irrelevant talking. Hey, there's Dawn. Wave, Dawn. In the meantime, why don't we take care of a few pieces of business? Mr. Producer, can you please run the commercial, and we'll come back. I'll do a proper intro, and we can.
Hi, I'm Wendell Weatherspoon, owner of www.bizblack.info, a free-to-use Black business portal designed solely to increase the turnover of Black dollars within the Black community. I didn't know just doesn't cut it anymore. Through a keyword or category search, we work to, within seconds, provide motivated buyers, not surfers, the names, locations, websites, and more of Black businesses, professionals, and organizations. Visit us today and bookmark www.bizblack.info.
All right. That commercial? I know I am. That means we need some more sponsors. So if any of you out there have a few extra pennies that you can donate to the cause here to keep us afloat, really appreciate that. And we can run your commercial. How about that? And then we don't have to be as bored by that one anymore. At any rate, the reason we're here tonight is, of course, we want to welcome Dawn Silva. And she's got a long hair, some of which she's going to talk about tonight. But we're primarily talk about this great new book that she has not only written but self-published as well. It's called The Funk Queen, and fundamentally, it's a story of. But of course, the story of her life is like, if you're a funketeer, call yourself a funketeer or related to a funketeer, or even know what a funketeer is, it's kind of like the story of your life, but it's all told from her perspective. And, she's a member of Sly and the Family Stone, Parliament Funkadelic, Brides of Funkenstein, a Gap band, and sang background behind umpteen numbers of other famous artists that you know and love. And the book is all about the trials and tribulations of doing that for 50 or 60 years. And we're going to talk about 60. so she's going to talk about the book. She's going to talk about the book.
Yeah.
I don't know if you can display any of this, Mr. Producer, but that's what the book looks like. Almost 600 pages long, and it's full of text, and it's also full of pictures, a few of which you've seen in the past. You've never seen before. Okay, you've never seen these pictures before, but they're all about. If you've been close to this music, you know about these events. You just never got to see any of these backstage pictures. Okay, so go to the next slide, Mr. Producer, if you can. This is our loose agenda for tonight. We did the intro, we did the commercial. Dawn's going to do read some key things from the book. It says 40 minutes. Might not really take that long. We're sort of playing that by ear. I've allocated 40 minutes for your questions. So, start asking those questions. Just type them into the chat room. The producer will pick them up and relay them to me. And on the way, we're also going to get what I call a radio promotion lesson from Henry, which is a really cool thing that I think most of you will enjoy. A few closing thoughts, and we'll see how it goes. Next slide, Mr. Producer. Next slide. Okay. I'm not going to read all of this, but I will try to summarize what this says here, just so you really know what we're dealing with here. Dawn Silva with Sly Stone. Okay, she moved into the quote unquote funk arena when supporting Sly on Parliament Funkadelic's 1976 tour, and then Dawn ended up becoming a member of Parliament Funkadelic. And she did that up until late 70s, early 80s, I'm going to say. I mean, she'll probably get more specific about the dates. But supposed to happen, and did happen, was that a spin-off group called the Brides of Funkenstein was formed, and they had a recording contract, they had concert dates, and they were going to be a legit spin-off of Parliament Funkadelic, basically not so much to appeal to the quote-unquote funk marketplace, but to the then TV marketplace. Well, that didn't quite happen. And Dawn goes into why in the book. And so I'm not going to spoil the surprise there. Then she went through a period of time where she was with the Gap Band, singing Gap background with the Gap Band. And on again, off again, girlfriend of Gap Band's lead, you guys all know Mr. Charlie Wilson. And that, again, has its share of trials and tribulations as well. And that's a big part of the book as well. And, you know her best, if you fast forward the late 90s, early 2000s, for her independently produced and marketed All My Funky Friends, which, we're a big part of that story on Soul Patrol. And that was a very, very successful, one of the most successful independently produced project, period, of all time. And so now Dawn's got a book. Her plan is to, her thing with this book that she did with the album. And so she'll talk about that tonight as well. Henry, I describe him as a multimedia visionary. Okay. He was at one time a radio promoter, peddling his wares to black radio stations all across the United States. Today, Henry is got his own production company doing film and video all over the place. He's got some documentaries coming out, or at least on the drawing board stage right now. And he'll tell you about those later. And he'll also talk to you about his association with Dawn. So that's what we got for you tonight. I want everybody to kick back, enjoy the conversation here, send us your questions, and let's get ready to roll. So, Dawn, I'm going to pass the microphone over to you, and you can get started with your book reading. And see, just so the audience knows, part of what we want to accomplish on here is like you've ever watched C-SPAN. You know how they have the authors reading their books?
I do, yes.
That's what we wanted to have happen here tonight. So go ahead, Dawn.
I'm thinking you just actually saved me like 10 minutes so I could watch the game tonight. So you did the edit version. So that thanks a lot. Actually, wanted to show again the book. Um, Here it is. So I'm having it in my hand so you can actually see how big it is. It is a beast. It's huge. It weighs a ton. That's the front and that's the back. So yeah, Henry Mayers and I actually put this together over the last couple of years, and then I mean it's a lifelong story. So I really kind of want to start off. There's so many stories that I wrote in this book. I really didn't know exactly where I would start. So the best place is to start about the book, and it's not the first page that you'll see when you actually open the book is that there were 7 funk queens born out of the Parliament Funkadelic Empire. 7 key players. Actually, if you want to put a number on it, maybe about 13. But in the beginning, 7 that were born out of the Parliament Funkadelic Funk Queens, and I am but one of them, and this is my story. So there are books that are coming out with the other females that actually work with Parliament Funkadelic soon, so that should be coming out sometime next year. So if you think that this book is a courageous tale and pretty shocking and so many things that I've heard about this book, wait till that one drops. But in the meantime, they started this out saying, in a world that thrives for success, why would a management company deliberately, and I mean deliberately, sabotage its female recording artists, especially after they were winning back-to-back music awards with chart-topping records and had a trademark sound that sold millions? Long before the 2018 Me Too movement, there was a story of a rebellious American female recording artist who escaped and has survived an era of subjugated institutions, misogyny, physical and mental abuse, beating the odds and recapturing a worldwide underground cult following, which is in this book, and you'll find out what that underground cult following is. And it's been supporting me for the last 25 years. This true story is no longer, these are Henry Mayer's words, this true story is no longer funk's best kept secret. It is a story of survival and persistence, a tale of a courageous woman who stood against the male dominated music industry and never backed down, no matter how often she was knocked down. And each time she would rise stronger and better than before. Then we'll fast forward over to the prologue, which I did snippets. This is one of the first things that you'll see right here, right? This picture, you can see it on here. Let me get a better angle of it. This drawing was done by Overton Lloyd, graphic artist, designer extraordinary. So the prologue is one of my favorites. It starts off, it was the summer of 1968 when my father said out of the blue, "You want to go with me to see Sly and the Family Stone?" Sly and the Family Stone was my favorite group in the whole world, and the opening act was a popular Latin group called Santana. The concert was downtown. Go ahead. The concert was downtown at the Memorial Auditorium on J Street. I started crying and cried all week because I knew he'd get drunk and change his mind. But on the day of the show, he took off from work and said, "You ready to go?" We parked the car what seemed like a mile away from the venue and walked up to a line that stretched around the block. I couldn't breathe. I thought they ran out of tickets for sure, but they didn't. Our seats were on the second row balcony. I rested my arms on the ledge and looked down at the people on the first floor. Anticipation had a hold on me, and I couldn't be still. I looked at my dad, and he, like everyone else in the building, was smiling. The lights went down, and a rush went through my body. "Ladies and gentlemen," the announcer shouted, "Sly and the Family Stone." A thunderous roar erupted as band members walked out casually, one at a time, carrying instruments and taking their positions. They didn't seem to notice that everyone was screaming. In a blissful state of hours after the performance, I said to my father, "One day I'm going to be a part of a famous group." But unbeknownst to me, fast forward like 8 years, that dream would come true. So I went to chapter 18. And so for those of you who tuned in and then you bought books, and I know there's at least 700 of you who have bought these books, and they've been selling really good, and I'm really happy about that. You might want to read along, or you might want to just listen, because I'm just taking little snippets because there's so much to read. But chapter 18, and I got my assistant Domino. Here he is. This is my cousin Domino. Uh, he has this open so I won't lose my place. This is Let's Take It to the Stage, chapter 18.
Mm-hmm.
One of these great pictures that I have in the book, and there's so many of those. Chapter 18, Take It to the Stage, page 132. A tall, lanky limo driver with tired gray eyes stood among the friends and family members who waited for the passengers to exit the United Airlines flight. The cardboard sign he held high above his head read in bold block letters, Sly and the Family Stone. The driver leaped a foot when he recognized him. "Oh my goodness," he said out loud. "Right this way, Mr. Stone. We have your limo out front." The driver loaded up the rest of the gear and headed towards downtown Houston. He rolled down the petition and said, "I heard the commercial for your concert 3 times a day. And oh, here it is now." He turned up the volume. "Greetings, Funkazoids and Funketeers. The mothership has landed. Tonight, live in concert, Parliament Funkadelic, Bootsy's Rubber Band, and special guest star, Sly and the Family Stone. Doors open at 7:30 p.m. and we'll be tearing the roof off the sucker. So be there or be square." I turned to ask the driver a question, and Sly pushed the button, closing the partition to the private window. He was strangely quiet. I waved at the black van zooming by and found myself wishing that I had rode with the roadies. Sly's dark mood didn't stop the growing excitement I was feeling. I didn't understand it. It was a perfect opportunity to resurrect his career. And what better way than to perform before a sold out crowd on the same bill as Parliament Funkadelic? Just a few weeks back, we were performing with Roy Orbison and Helen Reddy. It was amazing, and I especially loved working on the Helen Reddy show. She was a gracious host, and we made excellent money. But P-Funk's audience, so I heard, was predominantly black men, and the thought of standing before them had me anxious and excited. I was like, "What time is the show?" After 2 years of performing before a primarily white audience, it was a culture shock to walk into the Houston Pavilion and see so many black faces. It was Halloween, and I heard a band member say, "The funk people sure have some weird fans." It was an understatement, and suddenly I was nervous. That fear swiftly dissipated. Bootsy's Rubber Band hit the stage, and a fast-paced funk testimony lasted for a solid 45 minutes. It appeared as though Bootsy and his band, including James Brown alumni Fred Wesley and Maceo Parker, played every musical lick they had learned. I didn't know if they were trying to make an impression on Sly or trying to kick his ass. I think it was a little bit of both. Sly looked nervous. When he walked to the stage, sat down behind a Hammond B organ, he leaned back and then forward. The drummer hit his sticks, and the audience was on their feet. Many raised their arms in the air, waving them from side to side. Others waited for their favorite song and sang along with the background vocals. Sly stood before them in the raw, showcasing a repertoire of hit records. We began the set with the 1968 #1 pop R&B dance hit, "Dance to the Music." And like this male, okay, and this male audience, I'll get ahead of yourself, and this male audience, like the former all-white audience, was hooked. Then we slowed the set to perform the 1969 #1 hit song, "Everybody is a Star." And even the strongest men in the lot attempted to mask their emotions. That night, Sly Stone was the epitome of success. And even in his most graceful movement, with just a wave of his hand, The tears flowed from all in ear range. And then Parliament Funkadelic hit the stage. Ladies and gentlemen, Maceo Parker announced gleefully, the mothership has landed. Stepping from her confinement, clothed in platform boots, sunglasses, platinum locks, and a floor-length white ermine was the good Dr. Funkenstein, and the applause was deafening. Sly's, Sly's debut performance with the Funk was outstanding, and so were the following shows. However, the reconstructed Family Stone was musically perfect, too perfect, playing the songs night after night exactly like the record, and Sly grew restless and bored with the redundancy of his own creations. On November 13th, 1976, at precisely 8:40 p.m. in the middle of his performance at a sold-out to capacity Civic Center in Baltimore, Maryland, Sly Stone rose from his organ, walked off the stage, and he never came back. See, I've read this story so many times into I'm ahead of myself because I already know. Then I start going before it, so I have to make myself slow down because I get excited. And then we want to fast forward over to what is this? Chapter 25, which would be the brides and Parlet. What page is that? Let's see. I have them all set here. The brides of Funkenstein and Parlet. And we're going to start on page 204. Yes. Here we go. When I first heard the track that Bootsy Collins gave us for the single, I wanted to scream. It was one of the funkiest grooves I had ever heard. And I thought if I acted too excited, he'd change his mind and take it back. So I say, cool. Bootsy's groove gave us a major kickstart to our concert, to our careers, Jesus. And I knew the moment the track hit the airwave, it was going to be an instant smash. That song was called Disco to Go. And it was an instant smash. And in fact, it blew up so big that Lynn Mabry and Dawn Silva, the original brides of Funkenstein, as you can see here, I hope you can see it on the screen, we won a record world R&B awards. We got the #1 top new female group for the Brides of Funkenstein. Albums and R&B singles, #1 top female group, Brides of Funkenstein R&B singles. But the strange part about that is no one in the organization told us that we had won those awards, and even there was even an award show. So it made it look like we didn't show up. That was the first flight, the first signal that something was a little bit not correct in terms of what was going on with the women of Parliament Funkadelic. But in the studio, we were victorious. Here's a picture, one of my favorites, with Bootsy, Len, myself. Over here, we had a great staff, which was Atlantic Records, that actually took us over to meet. I hope I'm doing this right. Which way? Tom Joyner. Tom Joyner and Atlantic Records pretty much kept the Brides of Funkenstein, the duet, out there. But for some reason, our organization, the funk organization, was a little tardy. So anyway, and helping the brides with their careers. So now we're going to fast forward over to page, let's see, chapter 27. That would be the sisterhood chapter in Europe. Page 221. The sisterhood. I love about this book. It's the pictures. Taking 2 female road managers on a European tour in the winter of 1978 was a big mistake for the P-Funk management. But little did they know, Cheryl James and Andrea Thomas would play a substantial role in the success of the tour and the careers of the women of Parliament Funkadelic. Moreover, their courageous efforts would help them to win the hearts of an entire continent. So while the Brides of Funkenstein and Parlette were over there in Europe, we were victorious. The trades were basically saying that Europe was under a funky feminine siege. Our shows were off the hook, powerful, and that's just the first time personally for me is when I found out just how powerful our sister group Parlette was. I believe they was kicking everybody in the butt in Europe. And the Brides of Funkenstein, we were doing well. We were doing great too. So the organization set up an interview to feature all the women in a popular English magazine. Since the organization, the P-Funk organization, didn't send over any T-shirts or posters or promo pictures or any of that nature, we didn't have anything to give to the journalist over there. So a photographer actually came into the photo shoot and he brought clothes for us to wear on this photo shoot. And those colorful Christmas photos, it was during December, those colorful Christmas photos showed up on the cover of Black Echoes magazine. The P-Funk management was furious, however. George Clinton had a feature in the magazine too, but his face wasn't on the cover. Parlette and the Brides were. That's when things got really ugly. So I happen to have that Black Echoes magazine. I put it in a frame. I've had it for years. Here it is. This is the picture that the magazine, actually the picture that was on the cover of Black Echoes magazine. Seems like after that article came out, things started to get systematically shut down for us. Then we're going to fast forward now to chapter 32, where Henry Mayers comes in, and that's page 284 and 287. Henry Mayers and I go back at least 40 something years. He's been there for me for many years, where he helped me actually save the name of the Brides of Funkenstein. He's been helping me promote. He's been helping me actually do concerts back in the days. And if it wasn't for Henry Mayers, I believe that the Brides of Funkenstein probably would have been a thing of the past. People wouldn't know who we were if it wasn't for Henry Mayers. So it brings me great joy to bring him into this interview today. So Henry, are you there? There he is.
I'm reading. I went on tour with Parliament Funkadelic for the next year, as well as working with Bootsy Collins. I promoted both of their records, not only with black radio exposure on a major scale, but on pop radio as well. The single release Flashlight played all over the world. I hired a friend of mine named Billy Sparks, who would later go on to manage Prince, to take over and sell our merchandising on the tour. What Henry Mayers and Billy Sparks did during that era was a unique concept, marking the beginning of independent sales, marketing, and promotions. Billy and I came up with an ideal to sell flashlights with a Parliament sticker attached. We had t shirts designed with the name of the album and the band on the front in different colors. And wow, did that make a huge profit! I was supposed to get a cut, but I never did. I believe that Funk staff members were very jealous of a close relationship I had with George. Most of them did not understand what I brought to the table or what I had to do to promote the records. They started forging the direct hookups with the DJ and cutting me out of a loop completely. Eventually, all of them felt the position was an unnecessary expense. After the release of One Nation Under a Groove, they didn't need me anymore. George and Bootsy stepped out to the national stage, bigger and better than ever before. Flashlight was the first top 10 pop single and the first Parliament album to go platinum. Bootsy Collins' Player of the Year was his first gold record and almost went platinum with 800,000 units sold. One Nation Under a Groove was the first Funkadelic record to sell both gold and platinum. Now, going on to the next thing that I'm supposed to read. One day I get this call, and it was someone from Funk headquarters asking me if I could drive Don Silva to the airport. But I didn't tell any.
Hey, Henry, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Back up for just a second.
Well,
I heard Dawn mention something called Funk Headquarters. Now you mentioned something called Funk Headquarters. Can you explain to the audience what Funk Headquarters actually is?
it was the office, the management office on 9 Mile in Greenfield in Southfield, Michigan. It actually used to be my old office when I worked for Don Davis at Tortoise Records as his national promotion director. It was my old office, and then when Tortoise went under, um, Don Davis rented it out to George, and that George put all the people from the Funkadelics who worked for him in management, like Ron Dunbar and Cheryl and a bunch of other people. And that was the office where basically they were running the Detroit operations.
Okay, because if you say something like Funk Headquarters to somebody like me who's just a fan, I think that's a place where you go to get funked up, you know? So keep going. I didn't mean to really interrupt. I just thought that the audience might appreciate your explanation of what Funk Headquarters is.
Well, it was one of two Funk headquarters. There was one in California as well.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, there's one in Los Angeles on Sunset and Vine. Absolutely.
Right. Um, okay, let me start again.
Keep going.
One day, this calling, it was someone from Funk headquarters asking me if I could drive Don Silva to the airport, but don't tell anyone. I said, hell yeah, I said. Any chance I could get to see Don Silva, I would take it. I was happy to hear they were getting some recognition, so I didn't wait for the green light from George. I found out that Clinton didn't do any radio or TV pieces, which means the bride's new single would get no regulated airtime on any station anywhere in the Mojo, however, was the only DJ in the nation who could still play songs in their entirety, and he played the 15-minute version Never Texas every day, all day for months. After 7 weeks on the charts, the album Never Buy Texas from a Cowboy charted on the top Billboard R&B's 100 at number 93, but was slowly slipping off the charts. However, Henry Mayers was not discouraged. Single-handedly, he enticed DJs across America to play the record. Many violated radio formats, while others created regulated versions. In less than 2 weeks, without any televised performances or ongoing promotions, the single cut Never Buy Texas from a Cowboy rebounded at number 63 and sold well over 250,000 albums. And that's what I saw read.
So in terms of being able to, go ahead and promote the music and get it out to the radio stations, and I guess there's a hookup with the concert promoters also. You were able to make that work.
Well, it's not this way anymore.
Right.
The way it was then was really unique, and what ended up happening in the 80s and 90s with the big payola scandals that infested all the record labels and all of radio pretty much destroyed that. And once you had the Telecommunications Act under President Clinton, and everybody started being able to acquire as many radio stations as they wanted. Radio stations didn't have that independence to be able to put on music anymore. They were totally regulated corporate wise. And so, the things that we talk about in the book about the kind of power some of these DJs had, um, the record industry wanted to stop that. They didn't want them to have that kind of power anymore. So when I talk about having a conference call with uh, basically 32 different DJs on the phone, deciding the fate of whether a record was going to be played on the radio stations nationally or not. That stuff doesn't happen anymore, but back then it did. And these men were very powerful, but they were also very organized. In the early days of radio, it was one or two DJs that were pretty powerful. They would get paid to play a record, and that was that. But as time went on, they became organized and they understood that they could control much more if they all acted as one group. And so a lot of the black DJs would um, would sit around every week, have a conference call, and decide whether they wanted to play a rate or a record or not. And a lot of it depended upon whether the groups or the record companies were willing to pay them for their for them to play their record in one way or another, whether it was direct cash or whether it was with the Parliament Funkadelics letting these DJs have a rights to put them in concert and put the Parliament Funkadelic and Bootsy's Rubber Band in concerts all over the country, and all the promoters were mostly black DJs. And that's how the records played, and that's how there's a story inside the book that talks about how basically they had all blacklisted the Parliament Funkadelic because they felt they had gotten ripped off on the of Dr. Funkenstein tour. And so when Funkadelic versus a Placebo Syndrome was coming out, right before it came out, they released a single called Pop Gun. And during that time, all of them just said, we're not playing this record. And none of them would play it. So Casablanca was freaking out. George was freaking out. And that's how I came into the picture. Was I actually put the DJs back in the good graces, or put Parliament Funkadelic back in the good graces of all these DJs by setting up a kind of summit between them and working out a deal so that they would get the tour that eventually became one of the biggest selling tours and would eventually lead to funk festivals all over the country.
So, and if you read the book, the way this story is told in the book, you really get an understanding of the way that it really worked, regardless of what we may have thought as music fans. The way it really works is really some cold-blooded, cutthroat business, and it's very well explained in the book. But I just want to piggyback on what you did say, Henry. It's really not that different today. What is different is that those DJs, those black DJs, are no longer independent operators. Those black DJs all work for the same company. So if Clear Channel, for example, they have a music department that has radio stations in 100 plus cities, and they tell the programming, well, it's actually worse than that. The programming is actually done from a centralized computer that Clear Channel owns, and then they distribute the songs to those 100 radio stations. So the people who
Right.
work at the radio stations have zero input into what
Right.
stations, what songs they're going to have to play on their station. That'll be put into their database.
It's even deeper than that, Bob, because the way it actually works is that the record company is the biggest advertiser for radio,
Right, right,
and they also, the radio station is also partnered with the concert promoters, Live Nation
right.
or whomever the
Right.
concert promoters are, so that they will only play records that are from groups that are touring and that are playing
Right.
in their concert venues.
Right.
So really a symbiotic relationship between all three of them, whereas before it was individual operators. That would be the guy in Detroit who also did the concert in Detroit, but that's all he had control over. Whereas now it's the record label, the concert venue, and the radio station. They're all basically partnered up completely, and they won't help anybody that isn't part of that particular triumvirate.
And in many cities today, the radio station company actually owns the venues.
The venue, yeah.
They own the venues. So the
Yeah.
venues that you're going to see certain artists performing at, that's not happening by accident. That's happening because of business relations company has with the record label, who've allocated, say, X number of dollars on a quarterly basis for, say urban music, what they call urban music. And that certain venues are going to be where those same artists are going to tour. So it's
that urban radio station also owns the pop station, the rock station, the country station, so that they own more than one radio station in the market. And in some instances, they also own the television station as well, and the newspaper, and so it's a complete, media ownership. And there's something like 5 media companies in the country that own 93% of all media in America, between
and that also
radio, television, film, everything.
And that includes things like billboards.
Yes.
So when you're like, I live in the Philadelphia area, when you're driving down Interstate 95 on your way to work, and you see a billboard advertising a concert for someone, that didn't happen by accident. Philadelphia, you can see in most cities, down at the bottom of the billboard, it'll say Clear Channel. That means Clear Channel owns that billboard. Well, guess what? Clear Channel also owns like 6 radio stations, 6 FM music radio stations in Philadelphia of all genres, urban, adult, pop, classic rock. They own, it's all set up in such a way that those people maximize their business. So,
and you can thank Bill Clinton for all that.
1992 FCC regulation.
No, 1996
Oh,
Telecommunications
96.
Act.
I'm
Yeah.
sorry.
It's okay.
But so, and I want to segue back over to Don, because the reason I went through all of that about the way the music industry works today is because I want her to talk about what she did with All My Funky Friends, because her success with that album is in the face of this whole can I use the word collusion? All of that collusion that Henry and I just described between the radio stations, the record labels, the concert venues, and all of those people actually operating in each other's business interests, it in effect freezes out somebody like Dawn that's got a great album. And so, talk about some of the kind of things that you had to do, Dawn, in order to get that album out there to the people.
Let's go back first with Henry was really very modest in terms of the 32 of the most powerful DJs in America. The independence that these 32 DJs had is the independence part is that they didn't have to report to the program directors, or there was no
Mm-hmm.
program directors list. There was a Godfather, which was Al Perkins. So I know that the Kid from Giza, chapter 32, that chapter is one of my favorite stories in the book because I learned a lot myself in terms of being an artist. I had no idea about how complicated it was in the music industry and how these 32 black DJs had a lot of power. They had the ears of the world. And I don't think anybody realized at the time just how much power they did have. And then when I say that Henry Mayers was being modest, is that he had a relationship, personal relationship with every last one of them. And every last one of them depended on him to help them promote their records. If it wasn't for Henry Mayers and he was just a kid, because there's so much in the book to talk about in terms of how he even got started by taking a camera when he was in his first year of college, or I believe, or high school, I'm not sure. Um, and he went to a concert and basically got in backstage by saying that he was doing a school paper and he wanted to go in and interview the band, and that band just happened to be a very young Kool and Gang. And if it wasn't for Henry Mayers, I believe that Kool and Gang, he had a lot of influence in helping them become going to you know gold and platinum status. And Henry did that for several groups, including probably Funkadelic and Bootsy's Rubber Band. And that's why these 32 DJs, they trusted him, and Henry did that for years with them. So that story, he gave you the a very short, edited PG version of it because it's a very extremely raw and hardcore chapter. Probably one of the most hardcore and chapters in the entire book. But fast forward in terms of what you were asking me about being an independent artist, I didn't start off like that. I actually wanted to continue on by keeping the funk alive, to keep and when you say the funk, there's a difference between, there's a saying, just because it's funky, doesn't mean it's the funk. The funk
Mm-hmm.
is different because it has all the elements, which we need a whole different story just to talk about what the funk is basically. So I actually wanted to fast forward to Woodstock 1999 in my chapter, and there's just a paragraph that I wanted to read where I actually went to a promoter after I got my CD done because I wanted to follow the same protocols that are in place for you when you put your record out. I didn't plan to be an independent artist. Basically, I was left with no choice, especially since
Mm-hmm.
I didn't want to sell out. I wanted to keep the elements of the true funk intact. I didn't want to, like Henry's word, bastardize it with digital loops and electronic sounds. I wanted to keep the true pure form of funk alive. And at that time, when you talk in 1999, they were systematically getting rid of the funk, anything hardcore. And one of the reasons I believe is that if you play a pure funk song on the radio, and then you play another R&B or kind of a popish kind of radio friendly song behind it, you can't. There's no comparison. It will be deemed weak if you play the funk and then something like a pop R&B song behind it. You can't compete with it. It's too powerful. So, but that's what I did with my album. I wanted to make it as funky and as hardcore as I possibly could, and I believe I achieved that. So, I started this chapter, page 459, Woodstock 1999. On May 6, 1997, I sat home and watched as Prince inducted Parliament Funkadelic into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. No female singers were inducted or invited. not even the veteran singers that recorded with the group in the mid 60s. Junie Morrison from the Ohio Players was inducted. And when he walked to the microphone with his golden trophy in hand and said, "I'm honored, but I don't know why I was inducted when none of the ladies are here." And when he said, "What happened to Malia Franklin, Lynn, and Dawn?" there was a shuffling and he was plainly removed from the podium. Later, Junie's statement was edited off the video. The women once again were devalued, disrespected, and deemed insignificant in front of the entire world. I shook my head and wondered what those songs would have sounded like if our voices were erased. And this is my opinion, and that's why I wrote it. Clinton's misogynistic soul wouldn't even allow a shout out. My phone began ringing off the hook as close family and friends pledged their disapprovals. I was determined more than ever to complete my album. And that's how I started with my album, All My Funky Friends. Um, I went to a uh, friend over at Warner Brothers who had an A&R position at that time, because I'm going to need to read because I'll start getting lost again. It's easier because I do remember it. I went to a friend and he had a meeting with me at the Hilton Hotel. And once I went up there with my record, he said he loved it. And once he found out that I wasn't going to spend the night, he wasn't interested in helping me get a deal. So moving on from there. And then I went to Priority Records, and I was these two young, three. There were three. There were two black, one black A&R guy and two young white guys. They must have been in their 30s. And they played the music, and they said that it was great, and they loved the way it sounded. It was funky, and that they said that I stayed true to the heart of funkadelic and P-funk, and they looked at some of the groups and songs that I had did, and actually Fred Wesley and Maceo Parker. Basically, I did a remake of Disco to Go, and I sampled the horns. I actually did a remake of Bootsy Collins' "I'd Rather Be With You," which they thought was extremely funky. But they said there was one problem. There was no longer a market for funk. They basically said that funk music was dead. Personally, I thought that they were the ones that were trying to kill it. So now I had no choice. I had to go independent. So I went to a company here in Sacramento at the time. They had a place called Paramount, and then you can actually certain type of money you can go and promote. You can go and produce your own CDs, and that's what I did. I had 10,000 CDs produced, and then they were stacked to the ceiling in my kitchen. And I figured out, what am I going to do with it? So I took those songs and I actually went to a chat board. There was back in those days in 1999, all that was left of a multi-million dollar corporation or in a multi-million dollar business was the Funk Board chat site. So I went on there and I told him that I had a record. I told him how to buy it. Uh, I played a few snippets and then I sent the song over to another dear friend of mine from Paris, France, named Blaise Schmitter. He did a hot face melting review of it, and next thing I know, the first 1,000 people over at the Funk Board bought that CD. After that point on, it was I couldn't keep up with it any longer, and then I fast forward over to uh, here we go, Bob Davis, and how I met him. Right after I had sold maybe about 5,000 CDs, I'll fast forward, but somewhere in cyberspace, I received a personal email from a guy named Bob Davis. Bob was from Brooklyn, New York. He's one of the first music critics to combine an internet radio station and an online website, and he ran it out of his home in Philadelphia. His network was called the Soul Patrol, and his candid music reviews would sometimes lead to ferocious arguments that dominated cyberspace for days. Bob had over 100,000 followers, and his main objective was the preservation of soul and funk music. His radio station was continuous and followed no rigid format. As a result, many linked onto his cyber zone and never dialed out. I was one of those followers. I read Bob's email and it said, I read Bob's email and it said, "I've been hearing about your record all over the internet. Why don't you send me a copy and I'll do an online review? I said, sure. So I mailed him a copy and I waited. Pretty much the rest is history. Bob went on and did one of the best interviews, song by song by song, about each one. And those 100,000 followers, I would say at least 30% of them actually purchased my CD. He actually helped to catapult that record, that CD, where I actually was had a feature in Billboard magazine. I headlined the North Sea Jazz Festival. I got license deals all over the country. It just from that interview from Bob Davis. So you fast forward it 23 years ago from today, and now we're back on together talking about a book that I wrote. But if it wasn't for Bob Davis, I believe that CD wouldn't have done as well as it did. And I actually sold out of my kitchen over 250,000 CDs. And it was such a rush to have the CDs, to have my product to go straight from my house to the consumers, no middle person. This is a funk record, a funk CD that record companies basically told me there was no market for it any longer, that funk was dead, and that it needed, one promoter told me it needs to stay dead. So the point is that I wanted to prove him wrong, and I did. I'm still proving him wrong. Yes, I am an underground funk artist, and I believe because they have been systematically suppressing the funk for so many years, it's become in 2023 stronger than it's ever have. Of course, mainstream doesn't really know that it's simmering down here below, and that's why I put on across the top of the book an underground railroad to the funk, because that's basically what it is. So with Bob, I wanted to do that today. That's how I pretty much all I have on my little notes to end with that. But actually, it's not an ending; it's actually the beginning, because I don't think people really know, especially a lot of the musicians and artists and people who do funk, just how powerful it is on this underground. Because I tapped into it not because I had no choice. I had 10,000 CDs I needed to sell, and I didn't know what to do with them. So I became my own manager, my own booking agency, my own publicist, my own marketing, my own distribution, and I'm doing the same thing with the book. Fast forward 2023, I write a book called The Funk Queen. The fact that I put the word funk on the front cover, the situation is still the same, where they basically believe that there's no market for that for funk, but it is. So I'm following the same formats that I did 23 years ago, and the book is selling far better than my wildest imaginations, anticipation or imagination, and it's doing the same thing that the CD did. Of course, this book weighs 7 pounds, and Henry and I basically I wanted him to talk about. It wasn't that easy to put together. It was just was. It took years. It's not easy to write a book. It really is not, especially one when you had so many different things that I wanted to talk about. It wasn't just the funk. This goes well beyond just funk music. But funk music basically is all genres combined. So how can you talk about the funk? And you cannot talk about R&B or rock or hip hop or blues or jazz or even reggae. It's all connected. It's all the funk is the nucleus of the music, and it branches off. It's the tree. It's the trunk. It's inspirational, it's motivational, it's spiritual. It's from the heart. It's just like walking outside on a hot day, or you're hot and you walk outside and you feel a cool breeze on your face, and it's hard to explain what that cool breeze feels like. So that's my quick synopsis in terms of why I wrote this book. I hope that it empowers others. I realized that if I would have read this book when I was 15, 16 years old and wanted to go into the music industry, I might have had a career change. It is a very brutal business. It's the highest of the highs and it's the lowest of the lows, and it's not all bad, but it's certainly not all good. It's not all what it's cracked up to be, but it is extremely rewarding. And for those who basically want to know really what the true music industry is, I suggest that you read this book, get this book. It's not for the faint of heart at all. It is not.
So let me before we leave this topic. I just want to just make a comment here. And thank Dawn for including Soul Patrol in the book. And I knew it was going to be in there because we've been talking for a year about what was going to be in this book. So that the first thing I did when I got my copy, I looked in the index for my name.
Well,
I
that's what
found my
everybody
page,
does.
page,
Everybody does. It.
page,
They look at the end. Yeah, they do.
page 470, and I read it. I said, you don't meet too many people in this business who are what we used to call. Dawn is one of the few who are left. I mean, she's like Popeye. She says what she means, and she means what she says. And there's not too many people around who are like that. But I also want everybody to actually understand what a huge accomplishment that was. That she bucked the entire black music establishment to do what she did. And I was
Collection ball wasn't just black. It was not just. It wasn't a color establishment. It was just the pretty much going against the grain of the
okay,
you know of,
okay.
of corporate America. Period. And here's the good part of that. The good part is that you maintain control over your music. Just there's a part of the book. There's a chapter in here called the self-contained black bands, which I think is a very powerful chapter too. Because as you know, in this day and age, there's not that many self-contained black bands out there. When I was growing up, there were hundreds. Remember?
Mm-hmm.
So I talked about the not being able to have control of your compositions or your music. The record companies pretty much took a great percentage of it, and if you weren't willing to give them a percentage, then they weren't willing to sign you. So, but then you have your pros and cons of being independent and being going against the system because you don't have the protections. When you have an independent record company or have an independent publishing company, and I had both. Back to the record company I didn't have anyone to protect my music, and as good as that CD was, everybody and their mama across the globe. I mean, you could think of just name a country, and everybody was basically pirating it or sampling it. Or I've had people come and knock on my door because somebody around the corner was manufacturing my CD, and somebody came and knocked on my door and wanted an autograph. And I was like, "Where'd you get this one?" And they did a good job, but it's like
They
that's what
want you to autograph. They want you to
yeah,
autograph their bootleg copy of your album.
absolutely. They came and knocked.
Ain't that a blip? Ain't that a blip?
And I was like, "Whoa, this is nice. Where'd you get this?" And it was a guy around the corner. So he sold about, I mean, hundreds out of his house. So that you don't have the protections that you have with the majors, right? You do have that's the downside of it. But you do have to put a staff together. And Henry Mayers, he's been my not only my best friend for many years, he's also been my he's done films on us. He's recorded shows with us. He's written songs with me. He's helped me to run both companies. The music, the CD, and the book. And so I didn't have a big staff. I don't even have a staff really that much. There's about four of us that run New Rising Publishing is the name of the publishing company. There's four of us, and they're so overwhelmed because it's hard to keep up with the book sales. I'm wearing them out. They're tired all the time, very stressed out. So sometimes I think like, what have I done? Well, but I did it because why? Just for the funk of it? Absolutely. I want to keep this art form alive. That is my mission in life, is because it's so powerful, mostly because it's spiritual and it's healing. And the kids growing up today, they don't have what we had, Bob. They don't have. If we have a horrible or terrible day, we could go home and listen to our music, and there were so many different variations of the music to listen to. We had an escape. They don't have that now. So that's one of the main reasons I want to keep this going. I want them to know the truth. I want to people that my children and my grandchildren and their children's children to find out who all of the thoroughbreds and who were the creators of this music, who they were, because unfortunately there's no books on Bernie Worrell. I mean, hopefully there's some coming soon, but as of today, there's none. There's none on Gary Scheider. There's none on Glenn Goins or Eddie Hazel. Where's those books? So I did that in this book as well. I talked about my relationships with them and how I grew for them, grew the growth I had from growing with them. So I've had a lot of great teachers along the way, starting with Sly Stone all the way up to Parliament Funkadelic. And George too. I used to study George on stage because to me he was like larger than Goliath. First time I saw him prancing and dancing on stage, he has such charisma, and all of those elements they helped me to grow. And then even going from them to the Gap Band, which we don't talk much about that in the book. I mean today, but then it goes from them to from the Gap Band to working with BB King shortly, and then going to the other side to South America to Brazil. Because if you ever wanted to go to Brazil in your life, you never could afford it. You want to know what Brazil is about, then you need to read this book. Because I went to Brazil with the Platters, and actually I found myself over there. So it's still a derivative of the same music. So that, but
So
Bob, back to you, back to Bob. Thank you so much for actually doing this. This is my first reading. I've never done anything like this before, so slightly nervous.
that's okay. Don't worry about it.
I
I,
want
wa- I
to,
want
yeah,
to. I want to piggyback on something you just said.
well,
We only got 16. We only got
this,
15 minutes left.
I want to say, remember this DawnSilva.com, because I don't have my Earl, I don't have my little thing, my cute little sign like you got in the back. If you want to get a book from me, just go to DawnSilva.com. That's it.
A producer just put it up. Yes, I wanted to mention that everybody that's listening tonight and that
Yeah,
will listen to the recorded version of this, you need to get a copy of this book. You might flinch at the price, but when you see what's in it, you won't flinch anymore. I got a copy of it right here.
well, real fast, Bob, the reason why the price is because you know what? It's not just an autobiography, it's a table book. Table books now cost $175 by themselves, and it has nothing but pictures. This has the pictures and the story. So it was extremely expensive to produce. It was. It was. But why did I do it? I did it for the funk, all because of the funk of it. I did.
And
So
when you open it, as soon as you get it in the mail and you open it up, the first thing you will recognize is the quality. And so I'm not going to say any more about it. You just need to go buy the book. Go to DawnSilva.com, pick up the book. Before we run out of time, though, we've got a few questions from the audience want to get to, but I wanted to just jump on something that you just mentioned, uh, getting younger people involved in this music somehow. And we've been talking obviously offline quite a bit recently. Tell them about your idea about going out to some of these college campuses.
well,
Can
that's another surprise too. They're doing proposals and stuff now for me to go out and do lectures, which I've never done before. This is all new territory for me. I've got a lot of UC colleges that not just the music but the history too. They're talking about, because of my indigenous European African bloodline. I talked about that too in the beginning of the book, the first 10 chapters. Well, a lot of Black Americans do have indigenous bloodlines. So if you start doing and tracing your history like I did, you'll be surprised what you come up with. And that's what I did. But my mother used to tell me about my indigenous bloodline. And so I have it on both sides, my father and my mother. So I did the tracing, and I went back 7,000 years, and I was shocked. So I put that in my book as well. So a lot of the UC colleges are totally, were surprised to read that in the book, and then a lot of them want to talk about it. So that makes me feel special because I'm not only going and doing lectures or for the music. I'm also doing it for the historical aspect of it, academic as well. So these teachers are ordering the books for their and giving class instructions with using my book. I never thought that would happen in a million years. It is the divine order of things. I have to give all glory to my Lord and Savior Jesus Christ. He's doing this. I'm not doing it. I'm basically just a co-pilot. I'm following his lead. I had no idea that that was going to happen, but and even on that level. But yeah, I did interviews with UC Berkeley. I'm looking at UCLA. A few others. There's one in York University in Toronto, Canada. Over there, this Montreal is and even today I tapped into Helsinki, Finland. So it's just we could talk. That's a whole book in itself. But yeah, I'm really happy to find out that the college is Sac State. There's a teacher here that has 3 classes, and they ordered 80 books. So that's all in a proposal state. We're doing that. Underground Books here in Sacramento, California, over there in Oak Park on 35th. Underground Books. In April, I had the #1 best-selling book over there. In May, I was in the top 5 of LeBron James and Kobe's new book. Unbelievable. Yeah, it's what's going on with this book. So it's a little overwhelming. I'm very overwhelming, but I'm so happy that it's happening.
I could see you touring the country, doing lectures in the daytime at these colleges, and then at the same college, like in their student union or whatever, you do a little concert, and just kind of bring it all around full circle. All of this that we've talked about, the book, publishing company, record label, all of this kind of stuff in concert. So that's still out there for you to do as well. Combining the two with mad crazy.
It's a new, like I said, new territory for me. I'm probably going to have to send Henry down. Henry's really good at doing this, I'm his student. It's different with if I don't have a microphone and an audience in front of me, it's kind of a little strange. The camera, with the camera, you can't get a reaction back with the camera and no feedback. So this is brand new territory for me, and I think the more I do it, I think the more confident I'll get. So like I said, this is you gave birth to another dimension, another direction for me, another avenue for me, Bob, and I'm so thankful for that.
It's me, it's the people. Because as soon as we started talking about this, all kinds of people contacted me. Oh, how can when's it going to happen? Is it going to be live? It's going to be on Memorex. How are you going to do this? And I said, well, just come. And we'll probably have her back more than once, and we'll go from there because there's always a new idea, and that's one of the reasons why I like talking with this lady because and once she figures out how, it's like bam, stuff happens and stuff starts happening. It starts happening fast, and before you know it, here you are. So here we are today, and I think a lot of good things are going to happen as a result of this, and so we're going to stay forth with this. Okay, I did say we're going to get to a couple of questions. I'm going to tell you guys the quality of the questions is not as good as I was hoping. We got one person who I'll talk to later who wants to just promote himself, but that's okay. We know how that works. We know how that works too. We don't. Okay.
Everybody has a dream. It's okay.
So first question from my man Lenny Lawson, who wants to promote himself, but that's okay. He's got a legit question here. He's asking about what do you see the significance of Sly Stone rocking with George on Funk Get Stronger? You got any thoughts about that, Con?
The significance?
Right.
It's Sly Stone.
The Sly Stone.
Oh,
So if you don't think there's any significance beyond the fact that it's Sly Stone, that's
it's
okay.
Sly Stone. Anything that Sly Stone, puts, endorses, it's just a gold mine. Anytime that Sly Stone can endorse anything, I don't care what it is. That's
So
that makes it that makes it significant. What most people don't
jumping in,
understand about what your friend, what Lenny, is that his name?
Lenny.
Lenny. Sly Stone did not change just black music, R&B music. He changed the sound and the look of modern music, period. End of story. Anything that Sly Stone does is significant. Anything.
So speaking of endorsements from Sly Stone, he endorses your book right on the front cover of the book. There's an endorsement from Sly Stone.
Actually, that was Sly's coined phrase, and there's a story behind that too. And that might as well tell it since I'm on here. When when George was wooing the Sly's girls over to his organization, I remember going over to Sly's house, and this was years ago, and he said, "Were you and Lynn on Underground Railroad Funk or something?" Which meant that we were like, he wasn't happy about us going over into George's camp. So he basically said that we were on the Underground Railroad to the Funk. So I used that. I asked permission for if I can use that, and he basically said it was okay. So that's how that happened to be on the cover of my book.
Nope. It's right on the front cover. Another question. By the way, Lenny's from Plainfield, New Jersey.
Okay.
Lenny's a great R&B singer. He appeared on our, and I was just kidding before about him wanting to promote himself. He appeared on when we did the virtual album, Soul Patrol virtual album. The guy sounds just like D'Angelo. Anyhow, another question here.
This is Lenny. That sounds like D'Angelo.
Yeah,
Well, he should be
and
promoting himself. If he sounds like D'Angelo,
he's really good.
absolutely.
He's really good.
Maybe he needs to come and sing on one of my songs over here. I would be happy.
Maybe we can arrange that, and I'm sure Lenny would be very happy to do that. Okay. Question in. He says, Dawn, I loved you. Mike bought the book. He asked the question. He says, Dawn, I loved your story that you about going fishing with your Uncle Eddie Bo. I was surprised to hear what he told you about Papa's got a brand new bag. Parentheses, that ain't music, that's junk. Because ironically, the music that I'm most familiar with are his funk classics like Hook and Sling and Check Your Bucket. If you had a chance to talk later on, I would be interested to get your thoughts on how his views may have changed. It was appear that the
You break it
breaking
a little
up.
bit. I didn't really hear the question. I'm sorry.
Okay, he wants to know if Eddie Bo's views on funk music or funky music have changed since that conversation that you had with him about Papa's got a brand new bag.
I wouldn't know because after I made that comment, and basically I said that his music was similar to James Brown because he had a funky bayou backwater feel with the funk, the funk was kind of sprinkled in there. And I basically said that I was just a kid. I was, what, 15? So I said that he sounded a lot like James Brown, except his music wasn't as strong.
Mm-hmm.
That's what I said to my Uncle Eddie. And he really got angry with me and didn't speak to me for about 11 years.
Wow.
So the next time I see him again, I'm very well. I'm an adult now, but he held that grudge against me for many, many years. So I really wouldn't know how he felt. Maybe he might have changed, and I just came to the conclusion that my uncle was a little jealous. And if he read that chapter in the book in New Orleans, when I was a kid, they used to have these big record trucks, right?
Hmm.
They didn't have that when I was growing up in California. They drove through the streets with these big old speakers on top of a truck, and they were blasting